with the help of you, John Solomon, Sarah Carter, Tom Fitton. There's a small group of us unpeeling layer of this onion, and I see a big house of cards that is about to come collapsing in, because now we're getting to the raw part of this, which is there is a deep state. Laws are being broken. The things we've been saying about weaponizing the intelligence community and corrupt people at the highest levels.
Including a top Department of Justice official who was removed for concealing his meetings with Fusion GPS, the dossier.
Bruce Orr and his wife, who did the op research against Trump for Fusion GPS.
If the FBI and the Department of Justice used a phony dossier in their affidavit in support of a warrant to spy on Trump associates, wiretapping them, that's a fraud on the court. That's a crime. You can't use dubious information in support of a federal court order.
You watched as I did the hearings yesterday. We saw a very passionate Trey Gowdy, a very passionate Jim Jordan. And I'm sitting there, and it's everything we have all been unfolding. And I said to my audience, this should have sounded familiar, because this is what we've been covering. How close do you think we are to now getting to the truth, and who's in trouble tonight?
Well, I think Congress is going to demand the truth and begin holding people in contempt of Congress if they continue to defy
Hillary Clinton, should she be worried tonight?
Oh, Clinton should be very, very worried tonight.
Should Uma Abedin be worried?
Yes.
Cheryl Mills?
Yes.
James Comey?
Yes.
Robert Mueller?
Robert Mueller, you know, it's hard to say, because he does have a distinguished record. However, the people he put on this special counsel team,
is it not clear that by now he has an agenda?
Clear biases.
Rosenstein, is he in trouble?
Oh, yes. He's conflicted out of this case. He refuses to
Andrew
do so.
McCabe?
He's in big trouble.
Sarah, you know all the players. You know all the information. You're covering all of these on many fronts. We haven't even mentioned Uranium One in any detail, but that's about to blow up in a big way. Who's in trouble tonight? Who should be worried tonight based on what we now know?
Well, what we now know, I think Deputy Director Andrew McCabe is going to be in big trouble. I know that Congress is looking at him now. They probably are going to try to get his text messages or subpoena documents that what he's been involved in from the FBI. I think.
How about Comey? Let's go through the list. Comey.
Yeah, I think Comey's in trouble. I think looking at this, they're definitely going to question him and ask him, why did you change this? Yes, I believe
Hillary
so
Clinton?
too. Oh, yeah, I think she's been worried about this for a long time.
Cheryl Mills?
Absolutely.
Uma?
Absolutely.
Anyone else you can think of?
Peter Strzok, Lisa Page. I mean, I think they're already in trouble.
Tom, you agree with all that?
Yeah, I think there's a likelihood the Clinton investigations get reopened. The Mueller investigation is derailed as a result of the compromises caused by having this FBI special agent involved. The #2 deputy being a Hillary Clinton activist going to her election night party, sending an email to Sally Yates praising her anti-Trump actions as an Obama holdover acting attorney general. Look, you know, just so you know, Sean, we looked into the prosecutors that Mueller hired. We couldn't find anyone who was a registered Republican.
Exit question.
We did find 10 registered Democrats, no registered Republicans on Mueller's team.
Okay. Exit question, yes or no question. Bigger than Watergate?
In so many different ways, it is.
Sarah?
It's more pervasive.
Sarah?
Yes, I think so. And
Tom?
I agree with Greg.
Spying by the FBI, Justice Department, intelligence agencies on the political opponents of the administration of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Bigger than Watergate by far, by far.
I say Watergate on steroids, human growth hormone overdoses. Thank you both. This is serious. All right. You don't want 1 minute of Tonight Show. When we come back, we're going to get Newt Gingrich's reaction to all of this breaking news. That's straight ahead. Or at least 17 others. Key to the investigation. The fix is in. I don't know any other way to interpret it if you're writing an exoneration before an investigation.
Look, I think this is unbelievable. If you and I had sat down, and obviously very pro-Trump, but if we'd both sat down and said 2 years ago, let's write a story in which the head of the FBI consciously sets out to protect Hillary Clinton, no matter how guilty she is, consciously sets out to protect her staff, no matter how guilty they are, sets up everything so that even his statements in public will exonerate her. We couldn't have made this up. If it is now clear, first of all, that if Comey and the FBI had done their job early enough, that you probably would have had Bernie Sanders as the nominee, because Hillary couldn't have survived the obvious news about how guilty she and her staff were.
When you talk about the Clintons, the fix was in there too, we now know. We know the fix was in.
So here's my point. You now have, and this is a very serious question for the Congress, and frankly, I think it puts an enormous amount of pressure on the Attorney General, because I think Attorney General Sessions has an absolute obligation to look at this information and begin to think about how they're going to prosecute Comey and how they're going to prosecute all of these other senior FBI agents who clearly, based on their text messages back and forth, and including, by the way, I think, a great deal of as yet unreported guilt in terms of the chief deputy whose wife had gotten, I think, $900,000 from the Democrats, and yet who was still engaged in all this. I mean, you have here a cesspool of corruption covering up for the Clintons in a way which I would have to say, as a historian, is unimaginable. I do not know of any point in American history where you have this level of a system of corruption. We've had occasional attorney generals. We had one under Harding. We had one under Grant. I mean, you can go back and find individuals who were crooks. But this level of constant, methodical undermining of the rule of law, people who thought it was their job to save America. I mean, you have this when you're talking about law enforcement officials who decide they will impose their version on the American people, you're talking about something very scary and something which totally undermines the American system.
Mr. Speaker, I want to get into the specifics of this. This is very profound because on a level far deeper than Watergate ever was here, there is corruption at the highest levels. This is no longer paranoia. It's provable fact that the fix was in here. You have James Comey. Then you have the pro-Hillary, anti-Trump Peter Strzok, and then his girlfriend, Lisa Page. Yeah, they're the ones that are going to save America with what they're doing. But this exoneration of Hillary Clinton, when you take out the word likely foreign actors were able to access her email account to cover up a foreign, a national security breach in this country. Then when you take the actual legal language, gross negligence, and you remove that and put in, and you try to be cute and put in extreme carelessness, I don't even know what to say. I mean, there's nothing. Well, wouldn't you define this as obstruction? Sorry.
Look, at every level, this is undermining our system of justice. It is violating the law. It's very likely all of these people will end up going to jail. But imagine that the reverse had happened. Imagine that they had allowed the law to follow its natural course. Imagine that you'd gotten a report last summer, or the summer of 2016, by Director Comey saying, well, you know, it's likely that foreign agents did get to her accounts because of the way she'd handled them and the way she'd broken the rules. It is clear that she was guilty of gross negligence, which in fact is a technical term meaning that she had broken the law. And if he had said, therefore, I am recommending that she be prosecuted, I mean, you would have blown the whole campaign wide open at that point. You probably would have had Trump winning with 55 or 60% of the vote. You'd have had a shattering of the Democratic Party. All of this is I mean, I literally, and I'll challenge anybody in our audience to find me a case where you have this kind of methodical corruption, this violation of the rule of law at this level of bureaucracy. Not the political appointees at the very top, but people who have spent their career who are sworn to uphold the law. And I think it's maybe the greatest crisis in terms of law and order and the rule of law in American history.
The rule of law in jeopardy. Do we have a dual justice
Congress
system?
nears a vote on tax reform. President Trump and GOP lawmakers are hoping for a vote early next week, and if needed, the vice president could be the tiebreaker. During his trip to the Middle East, Pence will meet with leaders of Egypt and Israel, but Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas canceled their meeting after the president officially recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. A massive wildfire in Southern California now blamed for a second death. A firefighter was killed while battling the Thomas Fire. The wildfire burning across Ventura and Santa Barbara counties has burned more than 240,000 acres and destroyed nearly 1,000 structures. The fire is now the fourth largest in state history. If news breaks out, we'll break in. I'm Trace Gallagher. Now back to Hannity.
All right, welcome back to Hannity. We have more reaction to this blockbuster news about James Comey and the May 2nd exoneration of Hillary before the investigation was even complete. Let me just stay on what he's exonerating here, because we know the mishandling of classified, top secret, special access program information. We know that was on that server in the mom and pop shop bathroom, closet, by the way. We know that she destroyed such information. We know that she lied when she said she didn't have this information on there, that she didn't send or receive. That's been debunked. Then you've got the whole thing about deleting 33,000 subpoenaed emails. Then you got the acid wash and the use of BleachBit. Most Americans had never heard of it before. Then you've got an aide busting up devices, BlackBerries and the like, with hammers. And the only thing they turn over to the FBI in terms of a device is one without a SIM card, rendering it useless for the FBI. Now, that sounds to me, it is obvious that laws were broken here, and that we now know 5 foreign agencies tapped into that particular server. That compromised national security. So does that mean now that the fix is in with Comey and Strzok that we got to go back and do it all over again?
Well, I think a couple things here. First of all, there's a report out today that she apparently had a deal. I haven't seen the exact language yet, but she apparently had a deal with the Obama administration that allowed she and her top aides to take away whatever they wanted to, which apparently included an entire section on her outreach to the Muslim community in the Middle East. I mean, first of all, the Obama administration didn't have the authority to violate law by having this kind of a deal. But second, this is a whole new zone that just showed up during the day today as a report of a special arrangement that she had made to be able to take all this stuff away, even though
that was
would
with the
be
Obama
illegal
administration,
in terms of security. With the Obama administration. So let me draw this into 2 parts for a second, Sean. Part 1 is Hillary and the entire gang from the foundation through her aides, etc. That's got to be reopened. Part 2 is the level of corruption and dishonesty in the FBI and the Justice Department. That's an entire new case. Both of these cases, I think the Congress has to insist, and frankly, Attorney General Sessions has to insist, that both of these are going to be pursued not as a matter of vengeance, not to go after people, but because the rule of law, the very base of the American system, requires that we take seriously when powerful people are corrupted. And you have both a Clinton corruption and a Comey FBI corruption. Those are 2 separate cases. They both have to be brought to light, and people have to be prosecuted.
I always thought that it was a mistake that Jeff Sessions recused himself here. And you got Rod Rosenstein.
Wait.
Okay.
Wait, he has not recused himself on any of this. He recused himself narrowly on the Russian investigation about whether or not the Trump campaign was involved. But as Attorney General, he's not recused on whether or not the FBI was corrupted, and he's not recused on whether or not the Clinton team was corrupted.
And I was specifically
told... And he has
told...
an absolute obligation.
Yeah, I agree with you. But he also didn't recuse himself on Uranium One or on the dossier, because, again, that came up later, too. You know, tell me...
Let me say this. Let me say this straight. Let me say this straight for a second, because I've known Jeff Sessions a long time. And I'll just say flatly, it's time for the Attorney General to step up to the plate and do his job. He has no excuse as somebody who I know believes in the law, he has no excuse for hiding. He has to set up a Clinton investigation. He has to set up an FBI Justice Department investigation. This is his obligation under the law to enforce it and to protect the American people. And Jeff Sessions has nowhere to hide on this. He can't recuse himself. He can't say he's not involved. These two things are so profound that he has to take them head on, or he's frankly not doing his job.
I don't think I could say it any better. It's serious. We will stay on it. Interesting. Isn't it sad? Probably the biggest news story in our lifetime politically, and the news media in this country has basically ignored it, and they've been co-opted by a phony narrative, and that they are spreading lies and fake news for a year and being caught regularly at it. Last word.
Well, look, this is the beginning of the end of their world. If the Clintons go down as hard as I think they're going to, and if the corruption in the FBI goes down as hard as I think it's going to, then the elite media will have been more severely damaged than any time in the last 50 years.
Chilling. Mr. Speaker, we'll stay on it, I promise. This is a huge story. Up next, the liberal media is doing everything in their power to cover up the anti-Trump TV. MSNBC took a vicious, nasty, personal shot at Freedom Caucus member, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan. Now, first, Scarborough went after Jordan for not wearing a suit coat during yesterday's hearing with Rod Rosenstein. I didn't know Joe was that stuffy and fashion-oriented. And then Joe attacked Jordan for simply trying to get to the truth and get answers on the possible bias in the Mueller probe. Take a look.
Jim Jordan thinks the American people are stupid enough, maybe because he's not wearing a jacket. He's one of us. Hey, look at him. His ties are untied. Why don't he just roll up his sleeves and put on a hard hat? So Jim Jordan is saying that now that they're actually getting close to figuring out what went on, and people have already admitted to wrongdoing, and may serve time. His national security advisor may serve time. They're now saying, why aren't you disbanding this investigation? How stupid do they think we are? How stupid are they, and how stupid, Willie, do they think we are?
Poor liberal Joe sold his soul to work at Conspiracy TV. Here with reaction, former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino, Fox News correspondent at large Geraldo Rivera, Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov. I want to start with you, Geraldo, and put your legal hat on. This Comey news tonight proves what we have been saying. The fix was in. When you read what Comey was writing in early May, before he even talked to Hillary and key people in that email server investigation, isn't that obstruction?
It is fascinating evidence indicating, at the very least, an inclination to go with the Democrats, with the liberals, perhaps a personal bias, but to prove substantively that altered the course of the investigation.
Of course it did.
Don't you think that it's far more important to stress the fact that you have the special prosecutor with lavish funding, all of these acolytes who hate President Trump,
love Hillary,
and they have come up with absolutely nothing in all of these months.
At its core, it is corruption. At its core, like the fix was in. Poor Bernie never had a shot. We now know the Clintons fix everything. Poor Bernie. I feel sorry for Bernie people. They voted for nothing. You donated for nothing. The fix was in.
The fix, you can't fix 4 million votes, and that's what Bernie Sanders lost.
Yeah, actually you can.
And to your point, no, you can't. And Donna Brazile even admitted that herself. To your point about the text messages, I think Peter Strzok should have been removed. But he also exchanged disparaging text messages about Bernie Sanders, who I believe is a liberal. Eric Holder, also a liberal. Chelsea Clinton, a Clinton, so mega liberal.
What's your take, Dan?
This is not just about Trump.
And I always want to be clear, Dan Bongino, because I want to be clear. I love the FBI. You know I love the FBI. I love the secret. I love law enforcement. I love our intelligence community. But at the top, we've got deep corruption.
Well, Sean, I know what you've done for our military and law enforcement, so there's no need for you to even say that. And the people who know you know exactly what you've done. This is not a knock on the rank and file men of the FBI. I've worked with them, and women, by the way. They're wonderful. But this case is a sham. And Joe Scarborough, by the way, should be embarrassed. I know Jim Jordan well. Joe Scarborough couldn't wipe Jim Jordan's nose if he had a cold. Sean, this is the critical question right now, which, by the way, an honorable man in Jim Jordan has asked. Was this dossier used to spy on Americans or not? Have you noticed, Sean? Nobody can answer the question. Rod Rosenstein said, oh, I have the answer, but I can't answer it. That's the critical question, and thank God people like Jim Jordan are asking it right now.
What did you think of the Comey letter from May 2nd, or the exoneration before investigation? Geraldo's being gracious and generous tonight.
I appreciate it mightily.
Yeah, Jessica, he's in a Christmas spirit.
Hanukkah spirit.
It's Hanukkah now, correct. Happy Hanukkah to everybody.
Thank you.
But seriously, that is a smoking gun. Peter Strzok and Comey had the fix in, and it shouldn't surprise anybody.
I think personally, if you're asking me, that the pressure on the special prosecutor now to wrap up this investigation. I fear that when we go to these other tangential issues, we lose sight of what is important to the 45th president of the United States. He has now been accused by half the American people and propagandized on a regular basis that he collaborated and colluded with the Russians to alter the election.
Equal justice under the law. I know you believe that.
I want the special prosecutor to go away. The problem with special prosecutors is they are so lavishly funded, they are empowered, and they never want to give up the reins. Look at Ken Starr. What started as a real estate transaction, Whitewater, morphed into an impeachment of the president. This special prosecutor has to admit that there's no evidence here whatsoever.
Do you see one second, Jessica, sorry. Do you see a real clear present danger to equal justice under the law? I do.
I think that if we keep down this road of a special prosecutor for everything, we will distract this government.
The Clintons got away with crimes.
I want the president to shake this off now. No more Russiagate. Now
You're
go
ignoring
on and make
me.
America great.
You're really good at your job. You're ignoring everything I say. Dan Bongino.
Sean, if you and I both know, and so does Jessica and so does Geraldo, if there was a text message in 2008, right before the election, between two senior FBI agents investigating Barack Obama that talked about an insurance plan in case he won, this country would have exploded, and rightfully so. This is a disgrace, and you need a special prosecutor to get to the bottom of it.
No, you don't need two special prosecutors for this. Listen, I said Peter Strzok should have been fired. That is highly inappropriate. The idea that they were sitting around in Andy McCabe's office talking about this. We know that under the law, under the Hatch Act, you can absolutely have personal political beliefs. Everybody has them. Everyone goes, and I hear you laughing, Dan, but it's true. The question
Jessica,
is whether that translates into action. And both Christopher Wray and Rod, Dan, just 2 seconds. Both Christopher Wray and Rod Rosenstein testified within the last week to say that the Mueller probe is working as it should, and they have complete confidence in that.
Dan and then Geraldo.
Jessica, seriously, with all due respect, you know I like you, but they are the text messages about an insurance plan to make sure if Trump is elected. I mean, that doesn't puzzle you at all.
What do you think they did?
I know you.
Because it obviously backfired, right? Because I believe Donald Trump sits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and Hillary Clinton lives in the woods. So obviously nothing happened here.
Let's get Geraldo.
I don't want to be a
but there's no special prosecutor for Hillary.
But we all watched. You point to MSNBC and the CNN and their continuing regurgitation of the same facts. They talk about Manafort. They talk about General Flynn without mentioning the essential fact that neither of those men had anything to do with Donald Trump colluding with Russians to alter the election. That's what this.
By the way, there was one.
Hang on, let's clean this up. Let's end
Wait a minute.
this.
Hillary bought and paid for Russian lies, salacious dossier to influence the American people. We know that as a fact, counselor.
I don't dispute
my friend.
What I want to do is let this president. I want to free Donald Trump. I want to free Donald Trump from
plenty free. He does whatever he wants.
To go on and be
set your DVR so you never miss an episode of Hannity. I want to remind you, you do not want to miss our show tomorrow night. Our sources are telling us tomorrow's going to be a big breaking news day. Let not your heart be troubled. The news continues. Laura's next, and we'll see you back here for an important breaking news Friday night.
Welcome to the Ingraham Angle, live from Washington tonight. How the Mueller investigation reveals that unlimited power does corrupt. That is the subject of tonight's Angle. What we've seen over the past 7 months at the Mueller investigation reveals a lot about how big government can end up becoming a threat to representative democracy. And the more we look at the web of Clinton and Obama loyalists who burrowed into Mueller's office, the more obvious it all becomes. There were a number of highly influential and powerful people working inside the Obama administration who were not only horrified about the idea of Donald Trump winning the presidency, they were intent on preventing him from being elected by any means necessary. And if that meant applying for a FISA warrant based on a phony dossier in order to spy on the campaign, maybe they'd do it. And if it meant deploying the entire mainstream media apparatus into DEFCON 1 mode, hyperventilating about Russia collusion 24/7, they'd do it. And today, if it requires floating a specious story alleging that the president has early onset dementia, well, they'll do that too. Or maybe spreading damaging falsehoods from anonymous sources that are later parroted and then retracted by major news organizations. Yeah, they'll do that too. And if it means propagating the idea that Don Trump Jr., Jared, and the president were in some conspiracy with the old KGB to throw the election, no problem. Whatever it takes. As a former Mueller investigator, Peter Strzok, put it, they needed an insurance policy to stop Trump. Going on to reference a meeting in Andy's office, and why is that significant? Well, here's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Bob Goodlatte.
Andy is presumably Andrew McCabe, the deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This text is very troubling because it suggests that they're doing something. They have a plan to take action to make sure that Donald Trump does not get elected president of the United States in the highest levels of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Now, this entire investigation, these texts, all of it, this has become a complete farce. They have an unlimited budget. They have an unlimited staff. They have basically an unlimited term. Mueller's team can stay on the hunt forever how long they want. It's insane. The founders never envisioned that a separate office inside the executive branch could hire a bunch of agenda-driven investigators in search of a crime by the head of the executive branch. I mean, if Congress wants to get rid of the president, they have a way to do that. It's called impeachment. That's their constitutional prerogative. But this deal with Mueller is now just totally out of hand. And at a minimum, a few things need to happen immediately in order to at least stabilize the situation. First, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe must be fired, period. He allowed Strzok to be the lead investigator of the Russian investigation after he had been a key player in the ultimate exoneration of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. And remember, he helped Comey soften the language of his non-indictment indictment of Mrs. Clinton. And there's a lot of other things about Strzok we won't go into now, but you all know them by now. And whether McCabe actually conspired with Strzok and went to the FISA court to surveil the Trump campaign, that's really important too, and that also has to be investigated. But a separate grounds for firing McCabe for cause may be the meeting Strzok references in his text messages, the thing that we just referenced. Because if true, McCabe actually took part in a discussion or actual planning, who knows, to subvert Trump's campaign, or maybe if he was elected, his ability to lead the government as president of the United States. That text message could be the smoking gun. And as for Bob Mueller himself, indeed, he has, throughout his career, served his country with honor and distinction. But that doesn't change the fact that right now, this investigation he's heading has become irreparably tainted. As the Wall Street Journal just put it, the man who should be most disturbed by all this is Mr. Mueller, who wants his evidence and conclusions to be credible with the public. Evidence is building instead that some officials at the FBI who've worked for him may have interfered in an American presidential election. Congress needs to insist that its rights as a co-equal branch of government exist to discover the truth. Now, I'm not calling for Mueller to be fired. It's tempting, but I'm not. But at the very least, he needs to put the brakes on this investigation, at least pause it for a bit. I agree with what Alan Dershowitz said on my radio show this morning. It's time for a respected, independent expert to come in and thoroughly examine the individuals conducting this probe and fire anyone inside who evinces even a hint of an appearance of a conflict of interest. That's all it should take. That's how high the stakes are. Otherwise, the public confidence in the Mueller operation will and should collapse under its own weight. These endless revelations of bias. And that's the angle. Joining us now for reaction in New York is John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor, and a recovering lawyer. And here in Washington, Richard Goodstein, a Democratic strategist. Richard?
And also a recovering lawyer.
Oh, no, we're all recovering lawyers. Isn't that sad? So, Richard, let's go to you first. Where am I wrong here?
This is Alice in Wonderland. Sorry, Laura. You know, I have a lot of respect for you. The FBI is what won Donald Trump this election, right? We know Rudy Giuliani had all his friends that put pressure on Comey to put out that letter 11 days before the election, which he had no business doing, and he didn't disclose to the public the way in which the Russians were trying to kind of tilt this election, in addition to his press conference on July 5th, which, again, went against the FBI rules. So that, to me, is kind of the fundamental way in which I think you're misrepresenting.
So the July 5th press conference by Comey, you think that helped Trump in the end because it was a non-indictment indictment?
So the FBI director should have either said, we've got the following charges, or done nothing. That's their practice. That's what their policy calls for.
I agree with you.
And he totally violated it.
I actually agree with you. I don't think he should have done that either. But the fundamental question about this probe is, just given the fact that it's so high stakes, just to have this guy, Peter Strzok, Weissman, Jeannie Rhee, when they're not just, they didn't just vote for Obama. That's fine. You're a Democrat. No big deal. But when you're someone who worked for the Clinton Foundation, when you represented Ben Rhodes, as Jeannie Rhee did, when you're high-fiving Sally Yates via text message about how she's defying the president, you're not just a Democrat. You're an adversary of the president. Yeah. That's why having them in the investigation, I think, is problematic. John, let's go to you. Ambassador Bolton, your thoughts on this as a former attorney and watching this from the outside. Bob Mueller has a stellar reputation. Republicans built it up, and so did Democrats.
Well, I think that it doesn't really matter what Bob Mueller's reputation is before he becomes an independent counsel, because I think the entire concept of independent counsel is so fundamentally flawed that you inherently have the risk of the investigation turning into exactly what this has turned into. I think Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, however, is the one who's not doing his job. His testimony yesterday, I think, was extremely disturbing because he demonstrated, to my mind, utter obliviousness to this maelstrom that's surrounding the Mueller investigation. Seemingly unable to look at these examples of bias by Peter Strzok and many, many others and connect them to what's happening in the investigation. So when you combine that with the fundamentally unconstitutional nature of an unrestrained independent counsel, I think we are seeing the destruction of the reputation of the Justice Department and the FBI. I'm an alumnus of the Justice Department. I've worked with FBI investigators in a number of capacities over the years. I am just thunderstruck at what I've seen in the past 6 months coming out.
John, you know Attorney General Mukasey is the one who said only in banana republics does the winner go after the loser. So look.
No, this time the loser's going after the winner. That's even more remarkable.
No. There's this talk still about independent counsels going after her. Again, it's 13 months since the election.
I'm against an independent counsel to investigate her or anybody else.
Right. But you will agree, will you not, that Strzok, who's not a lawyer, he didn't actually put his name on the document. James Comey, who is a lawyer, went to a very distinguished law school, Laura, did. He was the one who's responsible for everything that went forward. So I think this is kind of a big misdirection as the noose is tightening, with all due respect, around the president and people close to him. We're seeing one misdirection after another. I think we'll see more of them until either Mueller gets fired or he says what he's going to come up with.
Here's a fundamental fact. More than one person can commit wrongdoing. I think James Comey so badly bungled the Clinton email investigation that Donald Trump should have fired him on January the 20th. He would have been fully justified, and nobody would have said obstruction of justice. It's a tragedy that he didn't fire him. But in the course of the email investigation, as we now see from the emails that have come out, we've got people who were so biased against Trump that it seems to me almost inescapable that their bias affected their judgment. And this is where Rosenstein's testimony yesterday was so bad, because it's as if he was saying, I'm not going to connect bias to outcome, which is clear. I'm going to insist that they say in meetings at the FBI, we should not indict Hillary Clinton because otherwise Donald Trump would be elected president. That never happened. I think what Strzok and others did was move Comey, if he wasn't already inclined to do it, toward the conclusion there was no requirement for cyander. And that's fundamentally wrong.
Right. And hold on right there, guys, because we also tonight learned more about former FBI Director Comey's decision to characterize Hillary Clinton's emails as just extremely careless rather than the statutory language, which would have been grossly negligent. Just tonight, Fox News obtained a copy of Comey's actual draft letter that exonerated Clinton. Richard and I were just talking about it, and it shows the phrase grossly negligent was deleted in more than one spot. So perhaps, more alarming than is that the draft shows Comey originally was going to state it was reasonably likely, though, that hostile actors had actually infiltrated Hillary's server, but that was also taken out. So, look, Senate investigators tell Fox News now that they suspect Strzok is the one who really made all of these edits, both to the grossly negligent language and about the infiltration of her email server. Now, Richard, I want you to address this infiltration of the email server, because this gets serious, because this is classified information that could have been taken by a foreign actor. And this was hinted at a couple of years ago when we were talking about this. And it was said at the time it was likely that a foreign entity did manage to penetrate her system because it didn't have the security of, as one of the guys who testified said, even like a Gmail program.
Let me indulge me. Your viewers need to understand what the statute says. Whoever having lawful possession of information relating to national defense through gross negligence, or let's say simple-mindedness, permits the information to be delivered to anyone in violation of his trust should be fined or imprisoned. Okay? Do we think that Hillary Clinton delivered the information on her server? Oh, no. Or let me contrast Donald Trump being in the Oval Office with the Russians, giving them, that's where the simple-mindedness comes in, giving them information that we got from, from Al-Qaeda through Israeli sources about using computers to blow up airplanes, and therefore tipping off Iran. That is textbook within that same statute.
Well, he's the president of the United States, so I guess when something's classified in that case, he would probably make the argument. Was he unclassifying it? I mean, Ambassador Bolton, I'm not sure how that is apt in this example when we're talking about thousands and thousands of emails that were deleted and a computer system that was maintained completely contrary to the guidelines of how State Department documents and other materials should have been stored. But nevertheless, Richard makes a point. The accusations about President Trump and the Russians behind closed doors in that one meeting.
Kicked out the U.S. press, kept in the Russian press. John, come on.
Then move to impeach him on that grounds.
Right.
That's up to you. But let's come back to Hillary. If I had proposed in any of my tenure at the State Department doing what she did, I'd have been fired. That's the example of different standards applying. Let's come to the statute in question, because you only talked about a piece of it. It's a very comprehensively drafted statute that starts at the top when you have clear espionage, where somebody intends to give information to foreigners, and it comes down the line to get to gross negligence. Now, why is gross negligence there?
Yeah.
Because being that careless can have exactly the same effect of transmitting sensitive information to an opponent. That's
You're
what
glossing over the word deliver, John.
Let me finish.
She didn't deliver. I understand. Okay.
Well, we got to wrap this, but
Comey's speech is where he said we're not going to follow that standard. That's where he was fundamentally wrong.
Right, that's where he's wrong. But why edit it? If it was also, I mean, they're editing that document for a reason, because they wanted to reach a particular conclusion during a presidential election year. They did not want to put a statement out there that, by any lawyer's understanding, and certainly it was mine at the time, would indicate that Mrs. Clinton violated the statute.
Yeah,
like
it was
any
a fit
military
of candor.
guy.
It was a fit of candor that they corrected.
Well,
except she didn't deliver anything to anybody.
No,
if a thief goes into your home, you're not delivering the goods that the thief stole.
No, Richard. If a military officer leaves a computer on a table that has classified information that he took home without intending to give it to him, he can be prosecuted under that statute. He's not delivering it to the thief, but it gets taken. He permits it to be taken. That's the statute. That's how it's read. But this is fascinating. This is going to be going on for some time. Both of you, great sparring partners. Withholding his support for the GOP tax bill until he gets an increase to the child tax credit. But some are just, come on, maybe it's a joke. Some are saying it might be an old campaign grudge. No. Causing him to sink a huge legislative achievement for the president? Come on.
Here's a guy that buys a house for $179,000. He sells it to a lobbyist who's probably here for $380,000, and then legislation is passed. You tell me about this guy. This is what we're going to have.
Here's the guy that inherited $200 million. If he hadn't inherited $200 million, you know where Donald Trump would be right now? Selling watches in Manhattan.
I watched him repeat himself 5 times 4 weeks ago. And
I saw you repeat yourself 5 times 5 seconds ago.
I watched him. Meltdown on the stage like I've never seen anybody.
It says 5 things. Everyone's dumb. He's going to make America great again. We're going to win, win, win. He's winning in the polls.
It's all true.
And the lines around the street.
Yeah, worked pretty well, didn't it? Well, there's bad blood now. And we didn't even get into the small hands debate, but God, weren't those the good old days? Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, help me out, my friend. First of all, great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Been a while.
It's good to see you. What's going on here with Rubio? I mean,
well, look, we haven't had comprehensive tax reform in 31 years. I think this is when you have a 52-seat majority, everyone's looking for their opportunity to get their issue highlighted, their issue addressed. At the end of the day, Marco Rubio is going to be a vote for us. He is not going to let this moment escape us, and he understands how important tax reform is. But I think he, like a lot of other senators, are making sure that they get their voice heard before this is done.
And Mike Lee is partnering with him, I guess, on this.
There's a couple others.
Corker is.
I think Corker's probably one that I would say is gone.
This is what I like.